All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our ICTI CARE webinar series. Today's topic is going to be subcontracting in the toy industry, hidden risks and fake factories. Just some logistics for today. On the right-hand side of the screen, on the control panel, you'll be able to ask questions and provide any comments or feedback about today's webinar. Also, we're going to be accepting questions on Twitter, and we encourage everyone to tweet today. Our hashtag is going to be ethical toys here, so if you do have any questions you'd like to submit that way, we'll be monitoring that throughout the day. So today's agenda, hopefully by at the end of today's webinar, users will be able to understand the landscape of subcontracting in the toy industry, learn a little bit more about how ICTI CARE evaluates and monitors subcontracting, gain insights into how CCR CSR, our partner and our guest speaker for today, works with companies to map their true supply chain, and discover tools for quality control and buying teams to address the risks of subcontracting. The presenters today, so I'll be the moderator today. My name is Tom Van Haren, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Responsible Sourcing at ICTI CARE. And I'm happy to be joined by Alex Chung, our Manager for Program Monitoring at ICTI CARE. He's been with the company for quite some time. He's responsible for the supervision of our technical team regarding program standards and audit quality, and he's an expert in Chinese labor law and environmental health and safety. And we're also very proud to be joined today by Ines Kaempfer, the Executive Director of CCR CSR. Ines brings close to 10 years of experience in the CSR supply chain management with a strong focus on Chinese manufacturing. As the Executive Director of CCR CSR, she leads the strategic design and overall implementation of the stakeholder engagement and the operations team. Prior to joining CCR CSR, Ines was the Director of Learning and Impact at Elevate and also worked a bit at the Fair Labor Association. So we're glad to have her expertise on board, and we hope everybody will enjoy today's webinar. Just a little bit of background on subcontracting and why we care about it here at ICTI CARE. So hidden factories, which Alex will explain, they really tarnish the reputation of compliant brands and factories. So they bring a bad mark and a black eye to those factories that actually try to do the right thing and really hurt the brands that that fail to address those issues. Of course, our mission here at ICTI CARE is to promote ethical and sustainable working conditions for all toy industry workers. So that could be first-tier suppliers, second-tier suppliers, and all those who subcontract into those factories. And unauthorized subcontractors increase the risk of quality issues and product recalls. Also, again, with the risks of unknown production, there's a higher risk of critical violations such as child labor or forced labor. Oftentimes, unknown material is used within that production. There are severe product quality issues. And in the end, it undermines the trust between business partners. Just to share some real-world examples of issues with the unauthorized and illegal subcontracting, the Tazreen fire in Bangladesh, there was unauthorized contracting despite all the best efforts of brands and retailers to take care of these issues and try to investigate and audit. There were still some issues without a true mapping of the supply chain back in 2012. In 2013, we had the Rana Plaza incident, and of course, increased focuses on modern-day slavery and the reputational damage as well as any legal liability that can come from contracting with subcontractors that commit human rights or labor violations. So that's sort of a brief primer into subcontracting and how we address some of those issues and why it's important. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alex here, who's going to discuss how ICTI CARE identifies and monitors subcontracting within the toy industry supply chain. So Alex, welcome, and I'll switch over to the first slide here and let you get started.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Hello, everybody. I'm Alex. So I will go through with you about the ICTI CARE's program about the hidden factories and the subcontracting. So I think in the toy industry, it is quite common that the factories will sometimes need subcontracting because due to the order pattern of the brands and buyers, that usually the products will be produced in the peak season while the factory may not have such a capacity. So in our program, subcontracting is an acceptable, since they need the extra capacity to produce the toys that needed by the brands and the retailers. And so for the audited factory that is under our program, they should be have a reasonable and functional enough of the capacity of the machines to produce the toys and the products. But sometimes they may also need to outsource them to cope with the production needs, and also maybe some production process that need the help from outside. For example, some of those unusual process like vacuum plating. So this is not a normal production that need to be done can be done in every factory. So for us, subcontracting is acceptable. But what we want to stop is about the hidden factory. So because you know for ICTI CARE program, we are issuing seals to certify certain factories that they are meeting the requirements on a global standard. So some factories want to get the seal without paying the effort to make things right. So what they thought they do is that they will try to have hidden factories to high up the actual production areas, and then we just give the model shop to go under the audit process. So this is something that we want to stop it. We do not want the brands, we do not want to get hurt. We do not want the workers to get being treated by this kind of factory. So and a very common phenomenon for this kind of hidden factory is that for the audited factory, they usually do not have a lot of product or production capacity, and also they may miss out some of the major production process. So Tom, for next slide. So when we go to do an audit, and the auditors will check on different aspects. For example, the production record. So this kind of production records means that sometimes when the product being shipped to this audited factory, they will have some kind of documents to indicate that it's produced outside. So when auditors go to a factory and do an audit, they will kind of look at this kind of production records and see where the products are being produced. So this is one way to find out where the actual production site is. And also, the auditors will check on the production capacity of the factory. So maybe in some cases the factory is lacking of some kind of production process. For example, the factory is producing for hard toys, but they do not have injection molding machines. So it means that there is a major production process has been missing in the factory. So this is also an indication where the auditors will take a look on where the product are actually being produced. The other aspect is about the ratio between the production capacity and also the finished product warehouse or in the warehouse. So usually for the hidden factory, if there is a model shop, which means that there is a hidden factory outside. Usually in that model shop, it will we will see that there is the capacity is very limited, but they usually have a very large warehouse where there are loads and loads of finished products being stored inside. So this is also one of the indications that could be an hidden factory case. So the other aspect that the auditors will look on is about the information of this audited factory and the hidden factory. So maybe on online, the auditors will check on the relationships. If there are any other factories that is also belong to the same group or belong to the same company. So this is also some of the additional information that the auditors will get to identify those hidden areas. Next, Tom, please. So this is an actual case that we have taken a photo in an audited factory. So this is one of the hints that will trigger the suspicious of the auditors, because you see this is the actual audited factory's office, but there is only a handful of staff in here. So we will not just only the office, but when the auditors go to the production area, in some cases there we will also find there's a limited number of workers. Let me give you an example. Is that we went to one of the factory and they are producing hard toys, and we went to the injection molding area. We see only 3 workers, employees are there. And then, this the peak season is not at the slack season. So when we went there, we see that there's only 3, and we interviewed these 3. All of them are actually line supervisors. So this is a very clear indication that the production is being hidden outside, or not being produced inside the factory. Next, please. So the other kind of evidence that we will look for is about the documents that that being produced at the hidden factory. For example, there are maybe some QC records or some of the documents that indicates the materials entering or leaving the factory, or in some cases we will find the recruitment records that actually the audited factory is recruiting for the hidden factory. Or in some cases, for example, we found that there are some of the workers' canteen payment record from the hidden factory that we can find in the audited factory. So there are quite a number of different hints that the auditors can find in the audited factory that is related to the hidden factory. Usually they are quite closely connected together. So next, please. So when auditors found this kind of evidence, they will try to take it one step further. And at this time, our auditors will request a visit to the hidden site. So in this also subcontracting site. So this visit is not equal to an audit, because audit everything counts. But during this visit, the main purpose is to identify if this is really a hidden factory, or if it is just a subcontracting factory, or maybe there's basically no relationship between these two factories. So the purpose is just to find out the relationship among the audited factory and the other factory. So during this visit, the auditors will take a walkthrough at the second production site, and also to check on maybe some of the records and just a simple walkthrough. So if they and then they will, but they will not do the interview, or they will not go into dive deeply into the documents, because it is just only for the identification. So if there is identified that these two factories actually linked together, it is not subcontracting. It's not. They actually have a close relationship, or basically they belong to the same boss or the same group. Then this second site will need to be included in the audit scope. So, next, please, Tom. So for the factory, if these two factories, there are situations that we can identify that they may not be closely related together. For example, they may not. In some cases, we found that the factories are basically do not belong to the same group. They are not producing the same type of product or similar products, or the production is not related together, or they are not sharing the kind of production capacity, or they do not have share the products, they do not share the workers. So we will during the visit we'll try to identify what is the real relationship between these two factories, and then based on the facts we found, and then we'll decide whether they have to be included in the audit scope or not. So next, please. So in this photo, you will see that this is also an actual case that the green arrow indicate the audited factory, and just next door there is a hidden factory. So basically, usually what we found is that the factory is quite closely located together. It is easy for transportation, and also the flow of the materials. But what we also see on the field in recent years, that the factories, when they try to hire up the hidden factories, they try to locate in a more distant location, so that it will not be so easily to be found by the auditors. So next, please. So when the auditors go to the factory, they will also look at those if the two factories have been producing with the similar or the same products or similar products, or sharing some of the production process. For example, when the hidden factory is trying to produce the same products for the audited factory, then this means that they have a very close relationship. But in some cases, what we found is that some missing production process in the audited factory may be found at the hidden factory. Let me give you an example. Some time ago, we went to a factory that is producing a box set for the paintbrush and also for the paints. So there is a plastic cup that contains the paint inside. So in this audited factory, they do not have any injection molding capacity. They don't even have one single injection molding machine. So when we walk through the parameters of the factory area, we found that there is a gate. And then when we open the gate, we see that actually the factory next door is producing the paint, the cup for the paints for this audited factory. So they have a loads of injection molding machines and loads of paint cups there. So what we at the end we found that they are basically the same factory. They just locate in the next door. They want to hire up the working hours and also the records for the injection molding workers. So so this is some of the examples that we do during the audit process. Next, please. So if the factory is not able to clearly differentiate themselves from this, then they need to be audited, included in the audit scope. So if they are being to be need to be included in the audit scope, that means that this second site, all the violations will be counted as the violations of the audited factory. So that means that if there is violations in this hidden location, then the audited factory will not get the seal issued by ICTI CARE. So okay, next one, please. So in this process, the case is that when we do first, we will do the initial review, and then we kind of like to see if there's a secondary site, and then we may do a visit, and then if they cannot, they will whether they fulfill the criteria that we request to be identified, no relationship. And so if the criteria is not able to meet, then we will include that in the audit scope. And then if there's a violation, then the certificate cannot be issued. But if they can meet these criteria, then we will not bother the secondary site. It may be a subcontracting site, it may be no relationship, then it will we will not include that into the audit scope. Next, please. So what we think that is that we really encourage the factories to be open if there's a second site, they can if there's just only subcontracting, which we understand that for in that respect, because they're just only for use for the peak season or production capacity purpose. So this was we encourage the factory to be open and then to let us know that this subcontracting, and then we may make a visit there, and then we will verify if they are really subcontracting or hidden. And for those factories who are not willing to be audited, and in that regard, for example, the auditors issue a request to visit the factory, the secondary factory, but if the audited factory management refuse to allow such a visit to happen, then the factory may not be able to pass. So in that case, usually the auditors will phone our technical team, and then our team will kind of try to persuade the audited factory management to open the delivery site. So but if they deny it, then the factory may not be able to get a pass in this audit, and then they may get terminated. So thank you for your time. So Tom, I'll hand it over to you for the following section.
Thanks, Alex. I think that was a great overview about what ICTI CARE, our third-party audit partners, and of course our technical team take a look at when they're looking at subcontractors and secondary sites and sort of hidden factories. For those on the call that have to deal with these after these issues arise in terms of brands and retailers. So in terms of notifications, obviously a factory, if it is terminated, they won't get their seal, or they may not get their seal in the first place. But currently, the only notifications that we provide are through our ICPS system, which is available to Committed Brands Plus members, where folks can subscribe to getting the audit reports as well as any factory terminations. And that's where they can also see whether the factory declares any subcontracted processes. So, you know, obviously we do work closely with the toy industry and the great brands and retailers out there, but this is the sort of only the automated process where there'll be sort of instant notification for those factories and those subcontracted processes. It's now my pleasure to reintroduce Ines, who will talk about a little bit about the work that they've done at CCR CSR within our industry, and then some of the tools that we're going to be working on in partnership with them. So, Ines, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tom, for this opportunity to share a bit. So, and thanks everyone for joining. So what I would like to do in the next 20 minutes, I will first give you a very quick overview what CCR CSR is doing. It's a really hard abbreviation, so thanks, Tom, for that, for mentioning it so many times. So it stands for the Center for Child Rights and Corporate Social Responsibility. And I'll just tell you a little bit how we get into this issue of subcontracting, and then share a couple of experiences that we've had in some of the work that we've been doing in the toy industry. So the Center for do I have my control already, Tom? Do you know to go to the next slide? Okay, I don't know if that was me or you, so I'll just keep on trying. So the Center for Child Rights, we basically, what we do is we work with companies to think about potential risks on how their operation can impact children, but also potential opportunities and how they can positively impact children. So we assume that, or we know that and believe that companies do have a big impact on children, and that's not only related to child labor, but it can also be indirectly on the way companies treat their employees will have a big impact on those families and thus on the children. And we also see that this is kind of a commonly shared value between workers, management, brands, and thus we do see a great economic value by bringing this agenda up and trying to, through that focus on children, kind of bring improvements particularly into supply chains. And we've seen over the years that I've been doing that work that this creates this long-term benefits for children and business. So we work mostly in China. We do have offices in Beijing, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong, and also do have staff in Shanghai. But we've now also have an office in Yangon, Myanmar, where in particular because child labor is a big challenge there. And we do project work in Bangladesh, in Vietnam, Malaysia, and even in the Philippines. The topics we work around, you can see this in the kind of three circles that are on this slide, is obviously prevention and remediation of child labor, but also the respect and support for juvenile workers, as well as we do a lot of work around supporting migrant parents and their children. So in China, that's a lot around the issue of left behind children. So we try to find ways to work with factories to create better support system for parents that then should positively impact the children. So this is very, very quickly on kind of our organization and what we do. Now, the reason why subcontracting is something that we look at and is an issue or is a topic for us is, I clicked probably twice, so is that we've seen over the years, and that's not a surprise to anyone, is that obviously the worst cases of child labor tend to happen among subcontractors. As a matter of fact, we actually feel that in a lot of times what has happened in the last couple of years through the auditing process that has improved the conditions in first-tier factories, the issue of child labor or either really under the working age or juvenile workers in an abusive situation has been pushed into second tier. Just a couple of rather recent cases that we have dealt with at CCR CSR. So these are not just cases from the news, but that where we have been involved with. We had in 2014, we were faced with a case where 42 children have been found in a illegal, like unauthorized subcontractor, and they were doing Christmas soap baskets with the name of the European retailer on those soap baskets. We've been dealing with some slightly different industry, child labor in definitely worse forms of child labor in Pakistan for a European packaging and paper and packaging company. this year we had 2 children in a second-tier supplier in Fujian. In June we had 3 children that we saw in an unauthorized subcontractor in I think province was in Guangdong. I haven't mentioned that here. And just the very latest, I just wanted to share with you so you see how kind of acute this is. It's just literally a call we got on Monday of 5 children that again have been found in a subcontractor, this time in a factory in Anhui province. So these just a couple of examples, and so because of that, because child labor is something that is so closely related to how supply chains are currently organized, and often we don't see it because they're not happening in the factories that are listed, they're happening below that. And that's how the Center for Child Rights got more involved into these questions around subcontracting. And that's how one of the reasons why when we work with companies, we do projects around that. So the way we work when we support companies, and we had companies coming to us that have done child rights assessments within their company as a whole, and then basically concluded that the biggest risk in terms of child rights is potentially in what they don't know and what they don't see, and that is in their second tier or second tier factories, or potentially third tier like component factories. And what we do is that we basically look at the products as a first step and do a product risk analysis to kind of see what are the products where, from potentially the production processes, the elements it involves, we feel that we might have a great risk, that there is much more behind that supply chain that we might know of. And this we normally do in discussion with the quality control staff within the factory, who often know the products very well. And so in particular for an example that we worked in the toy industry, we came to the conclusion that I think we concluded we had 2 groups of products that was kind of like greater in risk. One was products where we had a lot of different components that would be packaged together in the final component, like in the final product, that would obviously come from very different suppliers, from very different places, so which could make the process very intransparent. And then the other great risk we saw in particularly cheap toys, like holiday toys that are produced at a very, very, very low price, are sold at a very low price. It's kind of these pocket money toys that attract children into the toy stores, and thus are very cheap. Very felt potentially for those very low-priced toys, we might have a great risk, as we can assume that the low prices are pushing factories into areas or to protect, to produce under conditions that might not be favorable for the workers that are there. We then normally do a first-tier factory assessment, and I'll talk a little bit about the example more to see whether we do have whether we do understand where the toys are made, what is made in that particular first-tier factory, what isn't, what are the components, where do we need to look into, and then go into a second-tier supply chain mapping, and again I'll show you an example on how that could look like, with understanding what elements we assume to have in the second tier, potentially third tier. We then do the first step once we have a sense of where the toys are made, or where the products are made, whether this is second, third, or even fourth tier. We have an online survey for those factories that we are able to contact. And so this is kind of a first test. Do we manage to get the feedback? Do they answer? Do they have data on their factory? Does the data sound credible? And so this first online assessment just gives us certain hints on potential issues. And from this, we then created a first kind of version of a risk matrix, and pulled out factories that we found both particularly at high risk, but also factories where we had sufficient information to basically locate them. And for then, like as with that information, we then go and do on-site assessments in those high-risk factories to see what the situation is, and that gives us then a kind of a final picture and the final analysis on what we've seen for that particular product that we looked at, but also then pulling from that experience in terms of what does this mean for other products that this company is sourcing or is producing, and do we have to expect similar situations in other places? So now that sounds probably a little bit abstract, and I'll just make a few more concrete examples. So with that process, we recently did that for a toy brand. So we had the relationship. So we have the brand, we have the supplier who was an agent in sitting in Hong Kong, and that supplier put into the information that the brand had that the toys were made into this, what we call now Factory A. Now, when we did the first step, and I'm just going back, if it gives me the arrow. No, that was the wrong direction. Sorry. Seems every time I click, it's just getting me back. Okay, yeah. So this factory was the first tier factory, and so when we did the product risk analysis, and we kind of singled out those what were particularly cheap products, we realized that if we looked at the list, that this supplier was said that they are sourcing, or that this Factory A is producing 42 different kind of toys. Now, they were in majority some sort of injection molding plastic toys, but when we look at the toys a little bit closer, even to somebody like me who's not at all an expert in toy manufacturing, we could very quickly see that actually it's very unlikely that everything is coming from that factory, just because there were some other production processes involved, there was some textile involved, so clearly the different kind of molding processes that were used for those toys would have to be very different, etc. So we clearly saw a clear indication that probably it's not made by the factory. And then interestingly, starting to talk to quality controllers of the company, they were actually, yeah, it's true, we've only seen the products in this factory already packed. We've never seen the products being manufactured. And so we did a first assessment of that model factory, and we created a tool that we are reusing for those kinds of assessment. I will introduce that a little bit later. And it very quickly got obvious that, and then eventually turned out that none of the toys was done there. And this factory was a real factory, so a little bit different to the examples Alex just shared. So this factory was producing. It was a middle-sized factory. Workers were there. Everything was in order. It wasn't a perfect factory, but it was a reasonably decent, good factory. And they were producing toys, and they had their machines, but they weren't producing the toys that the brand thought there would be. It was a kind of higher level branded toys that were made for export that were actually produced in this factory. But those cheap toys that the brand was actually thought to be sourcing through the factory were obviously not made there. We then got to know with a couple of detours that there was a key subcontracting factory or factories under Tier 2. And a second level of subcontracting factories that we had with another eight factories, and then component factories that previously were undisclosed. We were 28. So basically, there were 31 players in the production of those toys that the brand did not previously know about. And we tracked this down as good as possible. It was a lot of detective work. We managed to get information for around 55% of those factories, and for 45%, phone numbers didn't work out. There was no response, etc. So what we then did through what we came up with through that process that I showed you before, with both first a online survey and then an in-depth assessment of some of the risk factors, was something like this example here that you see, which is a bit of a, you probably could look at it for 20 minutes, but we could kind of put in the factories into different groups, and where we say that either the compliance risk is really high or really low, and the reputational risk is really high or really low. So if we say reputational risk, we're thinking about how close is this particular factory related to that toy brand. Like, is it easily visible that really these toys are done for that particular brand? So it would be a huge risk if, for example, there is branding on the toys in one of these very high risk unauthorized subcontractors. And so unfortunately we could see that really the majority of the players that we found was in that second element, where we had a very high to high compliance risk, but also because there were some elements of packaging involved, we could clearly, there was also a high reputational risk, because you could clearly basically track this back to the particular brand or to the particular company that is doing that. And we then also looked at and compared a little bit. Do we see differences between the different tiers? Do we see differences between the different production processes? Just to see and to understand, do we have a pattern here and that we can learn from others? Now, when we looked at the tiers, honestly, it was throughout the results, unfortunately, were really quite bad. So it wasn't just that they were unauthorized subcontractors. That it was kind of, there was a reason they were unauthorized, because they would never pass any auditing process. And so the risk that would be as high as 10, so they were basically a 9 throughout in social compliance, and then with some differences in health and safety risk. But we could see some differences that when we looked at the by production process, and we only, in that second chart, we only involved those factories where we had more solid data about, because you could see not for all the factories we had very strong data, but we then could see that in particular everything that was related to plating, painting, but also spraying and paint spraying, etc., we had a very high risk in terms of social compliance. Whereas in terms of cutting, molding, we had much higher health and safety risk. So we could see a couple of patterns there. Trying to get to. So here are a couple of pictures. Oops, clicked twice again accidentally. So here are a couple of pictures of what we've seen, and I'm probably going to stay on this picture a little bit longer, as obviously it's what we one of the reasons why the company in the first place asked us to work with them on this, and so that. So this is one of the factories that was one of the unauthorized subcontractors. They were doing toys. We found in the factories, we found at least 4 children the age of 13.5 to 15. But was even more concerning was that even those who were, let's say, in legal working age, who were 16 or 17. I think the upper boy on the right-hand side, he's like 18. But throughout the factory, basically all the kids working there were, nearly all of them were children. They came from all over China, but seemed to come clearly from kind of underprivileged backgrounds. One could feel it when talking to them. Education level is very, very low. We could actually physically see it for some of them, that they came from underprivileged backgrounds. When we asked them how they found this work, it was just through. They all said it was the manager or the owner is their uncle, but when we asked some more questions, it got obvious that that wasn't the case, because they came from very different places. The uncle, the so-called uncle, is I think was from Hunan, but many of the kids were from Sichuan and Yunnan places. They had a hard time to speak Chinese or clear Chinese because they came from areas where they speak dialect and had obviously kind of low education levels. And so that we have to suspect that there was some sort of organized I mean, maybe trafficking, or at least there was an organized way to get those children to that really hidden factory in Shenzhen who was doing those toys. The children told us that they work 10 hours a day for 7 days a week. They have no contracts. That was confirmed by the manager. The manager said they only work six days, 10 hours, but the kids said most of the time they have overtime, so they work Sundays too. They lived in this dormitory, which is on the upper right hand, and some pictures here. It was really rather shocking because they, the dormitory, like the doors can't be locked, and so thinking about having like 25 kids living there by themselves, no one basically looking after them, they can't even lock the door. There are many young girls and in very miserable dirty situations. So that is, I mean, that was probably the most shocking part that we've seen in that particular project in terms of child labor. We've seen child labor issues as well in other factories, and in other factories we had issues such as this one, where it was not necessarily cases of clear child labor as it was in the other factory, but it was cases of children on the work floor. These pictures are not from a toy industry, but we saw actually very similar ones in some of the factories we were, where the children from the workers were just hanging around, and in cases that we've also seen where then the children start to help and thus get involved in the production process. And so the line between, are those just children of the workers just staying with their parents, or are they actually involved in the production process, kind of are not very clear anymore. The issues we saw were also obviously in terms of health and safety, they were extremely bad. Here's a picture of one of the factories. Their storage room obviously is not at all how you would want a factory to look. And for example, what here in this building that looks like nobody's living there because that's finished. There were actually workers living on the second floor with no windows, no doors, and just basically camping out there. So it was rather it was very eye-opening. All of this was in Dongguan. Or in Guangdong province, and so it wasn't like in far inland or provinces in China. It was where we really do have most of the factories. So this is, I think it just kind of illustrates a little bit some of the risks that we are in if we're not knowing where our things and the toys are made, and to potentially the situations that we would find if we dig deeper. Now, one thing that we have done, for example, with that particular company we work together, but also with other companies, is that we developed this very easy kind of checklist to spot subcontracting. And the checklist really has this idea that it's not something that only social compliance staff or whatever auditors are using, but it's something that that people throughout the factories that are involved in quality control, in sourcing, that they know about these elements and consider the different elements such as capacity check, inspection of documents, on-site observation, that they have kind of some of the key points with which they can very easily detect a risk for subcontracting. So, for example, the toy industry example I just mentioned, we felt afterwards with the brand together when we looked at what happened, that if the quality controller would have been more involved in understanding these processes, the brand could have known much sooner that something's amiss. And so this checklist is really something that kind of helps them to to have the eyes open. So if a quality controller or somebody is sourcing in a first level or a first onboarding assessment is done or audit is done, that the production capacity is really compared, but also that together with the quality controllers who often understand the processes very well, there is kind of awareness, okay, if we want to have this particular product A, B, and C, what sort of machines would have to be in the factory, so that in order to do those products, and that if these kind of machines are not there, then we know the products can't be done here, and so we need to know where they're actually done. Very easy questions with workers sometimes can help to detect it, asking the workers whether they've heard of the toy's name or the brand name, showing them packaging or showing them the toy and said, have you ever done that? Have you ever seen anybody doing that? And if obviously the answer is no throughout, then again it's there's probably reasonable suspicion or reasonable doubt that the product has been actually done in the factory. And so on top of this checklist, sorry, I'm going to go back one more. On top of this checklist, we also have two other tools. One is this online survey that I talked about. That online survey is not going to give us for sure one-on-one information, but it did show us in some cases certain risk. It did show us, for example, if factories are particularly small, if they seem to have no processes in place, if they answer a lot of times with don't know, don't have the data. So it's important to give them that option. We've also, interestingly actually, because many of those factories that we've seen this summer have never ever been audited, and so their answers were sometimes surprisingly candid. Just because they've not actually dealt with those kind of questions before, and so through those answers we actually did, could then go and visit some of the factories where we felt, well, that's probably something we need to take a closer look. We've also developed for this what we call the rapid risk assessment, because you might end up dealing with so many players. It won't be, both from a time perspective, from a financial perspective, it's probably not possible to make an in-depth audit for every single. So if you have the situation where you have 32 factories you didn't know of before, it would be very difficult to go and do 32 full-on audits. And so we did this rapid risk assessment, which will show enough, and the tool gives enough information to, for example, say, could you potentially make this a approved subcontractor, or is there no way that you can work with this factory and just need to find ways to produce differently? And so obviously that's then a question for the company who knows to answer. So what were we going to do about that? So I think that was my last slide, and I think I'm also about at the time. So this is just a quick kind of recollection of some of the experience we had.
Fantastic.
So I hand over to you, Tom.
And I appreciate it is quite late there. So we've got about 10 minutes left in the webinar. So if you have a question, feel free to submit those. I'll just go really quickly through some steps here for buyers that we prepared. This will all be available in the presentation, and a link to download it will be sent out after the webinar for those of you who attended today, as well as those who couldn't quite make it. So send those questions in using the bar on the right, and then certainly tweet us also at #ethicaltoys. So again, just for production capacity, before placing that order, making sure that the factory is able to produce the order within the right time frame, and then, as we've heard mentioned throughout many times here today, make sure that the factory has the machines and the production processes for the products that you're actually placing the order with. After placing the order, some things to look at is the production records, in and out warehouse records, CCTV records. One thing that I noticed in discussing for Alex when we were preparing, to take a look at those records to see if there's, or those videos to see if there's an unusual number of products suddenly appearing in the warehouse. That's a good hint to give you a sense of where those potentially subcontracting risks are. And for factories, obviously we want them to declare the subcontracting in advance, prepare the supporting documentations for the audits, and have those ready for our for the audits, for the quality control teams, the brand teams, the buyer teams, just in case these issues come up. And part of our advice for factories, this does go out obviously in Chinese as part of our program and all the other places where we operate the ICTI CARE certification. So mindful of the time, we'll take the questions and answers here. So this first one is for Alex. This goes back to when we were having a discussion of, say, a second site or a subcontracting site. I know that we refer oftentimes to the presentation of a second site. Does this refer to potentially a second site owned by the factory, or are we looking at just in terms of subcontractors? What exactly are we looking for when we go on site?
Well, when we go on site, we will look for the hints of the hidden factory. So usually in terms of hidden factory, they usually belong to the same group or the same boss. But for subcontracting, it means that they just subcontract some of the products to the second factory. So this is usually the second factory will not be located in within the same compound, because usually the products will be shipped outside, and then they or the products will be produced outside and then to be shipped in and after the finish. So what we are talking about is that we are looking at the secondary site. It means that usually means that there is the location is outside from the current factory.
Great, thanks, Alex. This question for Ines. When you're dealing with workers, you know, obviously you do this as a project for a brand, not necessarily in an auditing capacity. And I think you alluded to a little bit about the candidness of the workers. How do we ensure that workers haven't been coached for interviews, and any tips in the way that you approached the workers, say, you know, your approach as opposed to an auditor might approach that questioning?
I mean, obviously, I think particularly in what I would call the first-tier factories, and just to let you know, so in this example that I shared, that first-tier factory told us they have 7 audits a month, and if that's only partly true, then we can imagine that a lot of brands must have them on their list, and they probably make a good amount of their money through basically taking on these audits for others. And so in that factory, we clearly felt that every answer from all the workers, everything was in order, everything was fine, the workers were throughout coached, and it can be really, really hard to kind of break that one. I mean, the one, if we feel that like in this case, we kind of realized the products are not done here, so it wasn't that important. But if we normally feel that we don't get through the workers, I mean, obviously there is some in the question methodology, the way who is asking the questions, the way we ask them, that can help. And I just can mention a couple of tips in a minute, but one of the ways to get more candid answer is often then to try to talk to workers outside the factory, which is still kind of the most, in our experience, the most reliable way, because if the workers, for example, live outside or go for dinner outside and then one approaches them again and just sits down with them to have a chat, is much more candid information. It's, I know, not always possible, particularly in an auditing situation. Other things, for example, one of the things we did do with the first-tier factory when we started to ask, have you seen those products? Well, it seemed that most of the workers were not very well coached on that particular question. So they did just say, no, I've never done that. But we also actually had a couple of different brand and looks and asked them to tell us on a picture which one of those brands or packaging they've done. And so, you know, that is a question that maybe factories are not so well prepared because they're not going around with all the goods that they might have outsourced and say do that. So in that case, so obviously there's a lot of different scenarios of what just has been mentioned as hidden factory or second site. It could be that the factory partly does this product and just outsource part of the products, and in our case it was that the products were clearly not done there at all, so it was probably a bit easier to spot that situation than some of the situations Alex was talking about, where there is actually an operation running but there's another one. So it needs to sometimes very original ways of asking and trying to get the question from workers.
Fantastic. I think that leads into the next question here, Alex. This is probably for you. How does ICTI CARE distinguish between, say, a subcontractor we've discussed throughout the webinar and a pure component supplier, so the raw material or that component that feeds into that finished product?
Well, for components, our definition is that they produce some generic parts of the products. For example, the batteries, the gearbox, or the fabrics for soft toys. These kind of stuff, they do not very specific as a part of the products. But for subcontracting, it means that they finish some kind of assembly and also maybe some finished products. So for this kind of subcontracting, but what our program will focus is not the focus will be on the hidden factory. That means that we want to stop the kind of phenomenon about the audit factory is being a model shop, that they just only want to use this model shop, which everything looks fine and okay to get in order to get a certificate issued by us. So we are looking really focused on those hidden workshops. But for a normal subcontracting or normal purchase from a component, this is very common and it's very normal in terms of the industry. So we are not focusing on that. We are focusing on the hidden factory.
Great. We've got probably time for two last questions here. Question comes in as, what role, I guess, Alex, you can start, maybe Ines, if you have some insights. What role does specialized information technology play in supply chain mapping, traceability, and auditing? Or are we all just still relying on Excel and trading files back and forth?
Well, I think that technology will really do us good in terms of this side, in terms of this, because for example, for our program, we have a computer system called ICPS. So it will allow the brands and all those retailers to and also the factories to keep track on the reports. And when auditors finish the audit reports, then it will be put on the system. And at the same time, all the stakeholders, including the factories, including the brands, or the customers, and also our own team will be simultaneously receive the reports, and then we can download it, and then we can look at it, and then also identify any risk in terms of the factory or in terms of the audit. So information technology can play a very important role in this regard.
Great. Some really great questions coming in. I'm trying to sort through them so we get time for them. Ines, this may be a question for you, and Alex, I know you've got background in the law, but this question came in is, what is the legal liability for the brand owner or perhaps the first-tier factory or the subcontractor if there is sort of critical violations found, say child labor or severe violations of the law?
Alex, no. Obviously, it depends for who's the player. I mean, for one thing, I think for the first-tier factory, there can be a legal liability because they basically knowingly mislead their business partners. But I think it's mainly going through that and not necessarily. So let's say for the fact that the subcontracting factory is hiring children, I have not heard ever that that the first-tier factory would have been made legally liable for that situation. It's more that the first-tier factory is not fulfilling what they actually in the agreement with potentially the supplier and the brand say that they're producing those products. And similar for the brands, I think to my knowledge, but Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, unless the brand has knowingly supported that, let's say, children or very bad health and safety situations are being used and is actually directly involved in them, they're not necessarily legally liable. It's much more a brand reputational risk and obviously an ethical question than it is that somebody would come. However, this said, with all the new laws that we do have both in England, the California Transparency Act, for example, in the US, and some new laws that are in the process there, there will be more and more legal liability for companies if they produce in countries that have those risks. But the legal liability comes from the basically home country of the brand. It does not come from China itself. I think would be my answer. Alex, maybe, I don't know if you agree.
I think that's what you said is very correct. I think that if the factory hire a child labor, then basically, for example, in the case of China, it is the responsibility of the factory because the factory is the employer of that child labor. So the Chinese government will hold the factory to be responsible. But I think at the same time, as a buyer or as the brands, they really held the liability in terms of the ethics to use this kind of factories, or when some of the brands or buyers, they even know that there's such a child labor case has happened in that factory, but they still use that factory. I think that will hold to that ethical responsibility for that in that regard. And also there is a potential risk that the media or the NGOs that they may visit this kind of factory, or maybe they will have some investigation or reports that being issued. Then the brands and the retailers will be in very a lot of trouble or a lot of risk to deal with this kind of reports or in the media.
Thanks, Alex. I know we're at the top of the hour, but there is one more question that really sort of strikes at the heart of ethical toys and you know, some of the work that we're doing at ICTI CARE in general, and the idea of third-party auditing. The question is, other than performing all of the audits personally by an individual brand or retailer, what can be done to help reduce bribery risks when using the third-party auditors? Because I get the sense that, you know, obviously bribery can help hide some of these subcontracting facilities. So, Alex, if you want to speak to that, and then we'll wrap things up here.
Yeah, sure. I think that in terms of bribery, it's a tough situation because because when the third parties auditors are outside, and then what they did may not be able to be under the radar. But there are situations that we can do to reduce the risk. For example, when we select auditors, we have a very dedicated program to select it, and then to make sure that just only the auditors with good reputation and good past record are be able to be selected as the ICTI CARE auditors. The other possibility is that, for example, when we allow the factories to have report to us for those cases, and also if there is any bribery attempts, and they can just issue to us. And also, I think the other very good weapon to fight against this corruption is the transparency, because when the factory is able to understand our code and our requirements, and then they know that what is the acceptance level, and then there will be no gap or no places for the auditors to play around with our system, then we kind of equip the factories to know what our requirement is. Then it is a very powerful tool to fight against this corruption. So that's also the reason why we have a lot of training sections to the factory owners, to the factory management, to the field people that are responsible for the COC program, so that they are equipped with what the knowledge and to fight against. And also, for example, we have a very tight control in terms of the monitoring the situation. That we will do. We have some QC audits that we will, for example, the audits done by the auditors just finished yesterday, and then we'll go to the factory on the next day, so that we compare our results with the auditor's report. So if there's any discrepancy or any obvious differences or any obvious gaps between these two audits, then it means that either the auditors is not capable, or they have the possibility of accepting bribe. So these are some of the measures that we have.
Fantastic, Alex. Thanks for that. Thanks again for everyone hanging on till the end here. I know we went a little bit over time. It actually segues nicely into our upcoming webinars. The next one will be December 1st, Introduction to Responsible Sourcing in German by our new team member based in Berlin. And then on December 7th, we'll be having a webinar on anti-corruption and bribery issues. So once again, thank you to Alex and Ines for a great conversation today. If we didn't get your question, we've logged them all, and we'll send you a follow-up email. If you can all, at the end of the webinar, there'll be a survey that pops up. That would be great if you could complete it, so that we can find out what topics are important for everyone and prepare the next one for those issues. So once again, thanks Alex and Ines, and see everyone next time.